Hello, Motorrad World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP Thailand. MotoGP round is what we're going to focus on in tonight's show. By myself, Rob Portman, as always, and Paul Scott joining me. Paul, it's going to be another great evening of Talking MotoGP. How are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. All good. Thanks, Rob. I hope you're doing well there in the UK. And welcome to everyone who's tuned in. And I'm sure we're going to have one or two late tuner-ins. But yeah, good, happy or good evening to everyone who's tuned in. And yeah, I can't believe from last week to this week went by so quickly. And luckily, only another 5 more sleepies, and then we're back into it. And then we've got a 2-week wait, and then the finale. What's going to happen? I'm sure we're going to throw out a few curveballs and, discuss where we are.
Yeah, we're going to dive in straight into it tonight, and we've got all of our supporters, fans, experts, as we like to call them, as well in our corner already. Yvonne Pretorius is one of the first. She's always first. Evening, Rob and Paul. Again, early, ready and waiting. James Thompson, Wimpy van der Berg, David Callahan, Justin DP, Brian Ritchie, Wayne Taylor, who's one of our experts in the corner there, Dick Crosby, Gordon De Beer. Hello, brothers. Big weekend to talk about. Ashley Biden, David Howes, Joe Alves, Stephen Kalgoxi, Rian Petit, Francois Retief, Daryl Holmes, Naki Jr., Mariska Hutchinson already joining in, and Mike Teal. Good evening, Rob and Paul. Greetings from myself and grandson Liam Townsend. Great to always have everyone on board, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be tuning in as we go. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe in the land of YouTube, and on Facebook, just hit the like button and share it as far and wide as possible. Jenny Blake, Jaden Sneyman also tuning in. How's it, gentlemen, from Keith and Jaden Sneyman? Super excited to hear your guys' awesome opinions and views as always. Thank you so much for that, Jaden, and welcome. Kaz Weeks also joining us. Right, we'll start with, there were a lot of big talking points in terms of incidents and stuff before we kind of pull apart the sprint and the main races and this big championship battle that we have at our mercy. We'll start in the Moto2 race. Our Darren Binder was involved. Not the best qualifying again, although a little bit better, showed some good signs of pace, overall race pace, which we've seen from Darren. Can't quite get that one outstanding fast lap, but, shows the pace that he's going to be competitive. Got a great start, launched himself right up into that fight. Fermin Aldeguer doing, I don't know what Fermin Aldeguer was doing, but that kind of helped, broke the pack up a bit, and Darren was right in the right place at the right time. Until a little bit later in the race where the Ayagura incident happened. Now we'll talk about Ayagura, wrapping up the championship as he did. But it's been a big talking point. Now, I didn't get to watch the Moto2 race live. So I did go onto Facebook and I did see all these, Ayagura taking Darren out. And then I spoke to my brother and he was like, yeah, Ayagura took him out. It was a lunge move, very similar to Morbidelli and Quartararo, and he didn't even get a penalty and he's a champion, blah, blah, blah. So I was picturing this, this massive incident. So before I kind of give my opinions, everyone in the comments, please, your opinions, honest opinions on what and how you saw the incident. Paul, I'd like to hear your version before I climb into mine.
Okay, Rob, so let's just go back to qualifying. And I was watching Darren on Saturday mornings, Q2, whatever they call it for Moto2. And he definitely, and we've said it many times, whatever it is that he cannot do, he just cannot put that one. What do? Do you just go, excuse me, saying this, balls to the wall, one lap, hope and pray, put it on the edge, beyond the edge and get into the top 10, 12, whatever it is. Darren, I don't know if he doesn't have the ability or if he's just not prepared to risk it. But anyway, so I watched him, and at one stage he was lying sixth. And then in the last probably 6 or 7 minutes, he just tumbled down, down, down. And I understand that's his weakness, if he has a weakness. However, come race day, and Darren just showed us how good he really is. Yes, I don't want to say he got lucky. He had a brilliant start, and then Fermin Aldeguer did what he did. Just on that point, I've read nothing to say what penalty he got. Yes, we understand he's injured, he's damaged his wrist, got to go for an operation. Looks like he's ruined his first test for the MotoGP bike, but that's his own doing. Just on that point, did you see any penalty for him?
No, I haven't heard anything, and I don't know if that's because of the fact that he's potentially going to miss out. But surely if he does miraculously come back for either this weekend or Valencia, there's got to be a big penalty coming his way, because that was just ridiculous.
So I did look for it. I saw nothing. Anyway, okay, so then moving on to Darren. So a couple of things, and I knew we were going to discuss this. So I've tried to see where I find myself. So I'm going to be devil's advocate here for part of the discussion and say, if that had been Ayagura overtaking Dennis Foggia, Joao Masia, or Jake Dixon, and I mentioned those three because they kind of are sparring partners in the anti-Darren Binder club from years gone by. So I mentioned those three. Had Ayagura done that to any one of them, covered on TV as well as it was, we would have said, yeah, hard move. Me personally, I thought, listen, you got a championship. You're racing against the guy, and put any one of those three in the same spot as Darren. You're racing against guys who have no consequence to your world championship title. What are you doing? So that was my thought. The fact that he did it to Darren, I think personally he dive bombed him properly.
Yeah.
But he didn't do anything that did it warrant a penalty. I don't know. He certainly didn't push Darren. He certainly was past Darren when he hit Darren. But that was because he was carrying way too much speed into that corner. So should he have got a penalty? If it was Foggia, Masia, or Jake Dixon, I would have said, well done, Ayagura, you the man. But it was Darren Binder. So our hearts are judging this one. Personally, I think he was lucky to get away without getting a long lap penalty. I was more concerned for him for the move that he pulled. Because remember, 2 years ago, he lost the world championship by his own accord. And he could have done exactly the same thing on Sunday. So partly a racing incident, definitely over-optimistic by him. Luckily, no consequence to him, but certainly a consequence to Darren. Threw him wide, off the track, back onto the track. Now he's a little bit flustered. I think he lost 3 positions. He had the pace to run definitely top 4. Yeah. Would he have got on the podium, Darren? We'll never know. He certainly looked comfortable. He looked good. And then I knew once he crashed, it was just because he was trying to make up all that time. So 100% contribute the crash to the move Ayagura put on Darren. Darren, in hindsight, in his own head, would be thinking, man, another lap or 2 just to settle down. There was still lots of time left and get back into it. But it almost was as if he panicked. Yeah. And that was his demise. But anyway, so, yeah, I don't know, Rob. I think a stupid move by Ayagura under the circumstances and way too optimistic with, luckily, no dire consequences for either of them.
Yeah, I think, I'm, again, like I said, before I even saw the incident, it was played out to be this massive. I was just picturing this Ayagura literally doing a Morbidelli on Quartararo, like just taking him out. Then I watched it. And this was literally half an hour after I just had my brother on the phone to me going, Ayagura, blah, blah, blah. And, my brother's normally 100% right with these things, but you hit the nail on the head when you said it was talking, from the heart, and that clouds judgment a lot of times. So I watched it, and a lot of people, it's kind of split here, although a couple of people more siding towards the racing incident side. And I pretty much see it exactly the way Wayne Taylor kind of saw it. I think there were 2 reasons for it. I think Ayagura had the championship in his mind. He saw the guys going, and he's competitive. He's run at the front. Now he sees a Darren Binder in front of him who, qualified a bit further back. He thinks is not going to carry the pace. I've got to get past this guy now to go with the leading group. And it was his strong point. And that corner where the incident happened is a corner that invites that move. It really just says, come on, bring on that. We saw that move 100 times over the weekend in all the classes. This one, there was contact. Some of them, there weren't. It's just that kind of corner that there's 2 lines that you can go in. You can really just rail it in motocross style, berm it, and then get it out, which is what Ayagura did, block pass, and unfortunately it was Darren in the way. I do go side with the side that it was a racing incident. I think it's a dive bomb Darren Binder move, to perfection. I think it's the kind of move that we applauded Darren for in Moto3 and at times. And if Darren had pulled it on Ive, roles reverse, we would have been like nothing wrong. It's a proper incident. I don't want to say I want to, but again, this is an argument we've had for years now. I don't want that kind of stuff those kind of moves being taken away. I don't want riders thinking they can't do those kind of moves. I agree. It didn't go in there. Morbidelli's was a completely different incident, which we'll talk about. Just Morbidelli went in with complete brain fade. Agura went in knowing that corner, he could do that block pass, he could scrub off the speeder and bring it back. As Wayne Taylor pointed out, I think the thought process that Darren had was, okay, you've got me, because as you said, Agura was ahead of him. You've got me. I'm just going to lean on you through the corner. He didn't realize at that point that I was still pretty sideways trying to get the bike stopped. And, if anything, Darren almost had to pick the bike up more to allow that space to then put it back down and then go. Again, this is us seeing the incident afterwards 100 times. In that split-second moment, Darren's thinking, cool, I'm going to lean on this guy and try and get the drive. In a split second, I don't have time to lean on him. Whiskey throttle, bang, off he goes. Then he tries to recover, and then from that incident, there was, something happened to the bike, and that helped contribute towards Darren's crash. Race over. So I do think it was a moment where we were in our hearts, kind of letting the judgment take over. It's something that I think is renowned in Moto 2 and Moto 3, especially that kind of racing. So if we eliminate it, we take one of Darren's strongest assets away from him if we're going to be taking those kind of moves away. So yeah, I think, I don't want to come across as a non-Darren Binder fan, and it's not right. It's a racing incident to me, and I think it must be left there. And I'm glad it didn't get penalized, because again, Igor went on to win the championship, a deserved championship winner. Darren, to his credit, hasn't come out crying and whining like many riders would. Riders that you've mentioned would have come out, if that had happened to them, it would have been a complete different situation. So yeah, I think hard, I don't want to say hard but fair, hard but racing, and it's what we have to accept. Mariska Hutchison, Rob, if the roles were reversed, I honestly think Darren would have received a penalty. Mariska, I 100% agree with you. If the roles, Darren would have, because of previous history. Now, Iagura hasn't been in the headlines anywhere near as much as Darren in terms of hard moves and. So I agree. If the roles were reversed, Freddie Spencer and them, it's Darren Binder. He gets a penalty all day. So I agree with you, but it shouldn't be a penalty either way. So, and I think that's where we need to try and leave it.
Yeah, Rob, I'm just going to jump in there on that exact point. Darren, he earned, I say that in inverted commas, the nickname Dive Bomb Darren. But since he's been in MotoGP and he's 2 years in back in Moto 2, he certainly has lost that moniker. So what you're saying about, they would say it was Darren Binder, his history. At what point do they wipe the slate clean? I think personally, for the last 3 seasons, Darren has been as fair and as hard for the bits that we do see of him as any other rider out there. I understand Moto 3, he was definitely, he earned his moniker. There's no doubt about it. So I just going on that point, I hope that wouldn't have been the case had the roles been reversed. And that the stewards say, but it's Darren Binder. Check this oak from back in 1841, he did this to someone. He's certainly matured in many ways, and that's no longer, I think, yes, it'll always stick because it just rhymes and it works. But I think he's beyond that now. So I hear what you're saying. I just hope if the roles were reversed, that wouldn't have been the case from previous history. Going back to the last 2, even his year in MotoGP. Moto 3, different story altogether. But that's, that's the past. And I think it should apply to any rider. At some point, whether it's the beginning of the year, you've got to wipe the slate clean and say, okay, boys, let's start. Everyone, 1st of January, you've all got a clean slate. We're going to try and not worry about what you did last year, last race, whatever the case might be. But anyway, that's a moot point, but just something I hope that's how the stewards would have seen it if it had been the other way around.
So a couple of very valid points and a couple of very valid comments here. Deep Sea Diver saying it's been 3 years since Darren's pulled moves like that, kind of like what you're saying. I think in terms of the slate being wiped clean, I think from Simon Crafar coming in next year, relevant, unbiased playing field. I think Simon Crafar would look at that incident, judging by how little they've made of it, as a pure racing incident. So yeah, I mean, like Wayne Taylor says, I don't think they wiped the slate clean, Paul. Just one move from him and it'll be back. And, a couple of people commenting against Darren and they'll never forget it. I think that'll carry for the rest of I think starting from 2025 with Simon, it is different. But I do agree with you, Darren certainly it must have knocked Darren, because he got panelled in the press. The Jake Dixon thing, I think, really did send Darren backwards, big time. 10 steps backwards, and Darren slowly starting to take those steps forward. In those incidents now, I think the Moto3 Darren would go, gap, I'm going. I think that the Darren now, after all these incidents, is going gap. And again, in that split second, you picture the headline you're going to make by taking this guy out. That all happens and I promise you, it's the weirdest thing to explain. That all happens in that split second. So then you pull the brake lever a little, or and that to me has been to the demise of MotoGP and some of the riders in any way, because that was Darren's strong point. We all have to put our hands up and say Darren did get it wrong a lot of the times and was deserving of penalties, but there were a lot of times where he didn't get it wrong and he made those moves, and that's what that was the beauty of Darren. That was his confidence. Now you took that chink in his armor away, or that piece of his armory away, and that he's taken time to kind of build that back up now. So it's the same with MotoGP. We've spoken about Brad. How many times are we seeing Brad or other riders, Mark? I don't think Mark still goes for it. Pecco or Martin or any other guys going, I'm going for.
Rob, you've frozen.
You see now? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, you froze there.
I think they closed this door downstairs and it interferes with my signal. But anyway, I don't want this this Brad and any rider to be having to think, should I go? I want him to be back in the, listen, there has to be a certain point of should I go. Morbidelli should have had a certain should I go. But the rider etiquette should take over rather than the thought of what's race direction going to do to me.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, I think, and also I go back to the point of Ayagura. Yes, he pulled a move. I think, he was past Darren when they actually made contact. As you say, that corner allowed you to go wide, cut it to the apex, or go in and run it wide like a motocross pass. And, they took the two different lines. And I think Darren was fairly lucky that he didn't get thrown off the bike, because clearly you saw his throttle and that brake guard thing hook on Gura's bike. But anyway, so as you say, the stewards didn't say anything. The commentators didn't make a big hoo-ha about it. So, I think we just Darren needs to move on. The disappointing thing, it was almost a guaranteed 4th place for him. I think maybe even 5th. It was good points. It was drilling his teammate. It was a nice statement to say to the team, look what I can do. But anyway, it's racing and it happens. So time to, regroup. He's got this weekend again. Do what he has to do. I just hope he can get that qualifying. If we see Darren starting, we've said it many times, I think 8th to 12th, he's going to be fighting in the front group, almost without a doubt.
I agree with you. So, let's see what happens. Gary Kaiser's comment about, it was a stupid nickname is valid. It was a nickname that we, in some ways you love because it just, fits the bill. It just suits him down to a T. But at the same time, did it impact him? I know, speaking years ago to Trevor Binder, he didn't like it because he said it's labeled him. It's put this label on him that, he's an easy target now. And I think it did backfire on him in many ways. We loved it because that's just South African mentality, go Donna Oaks and Muda Oaks and PK Oaks and stuff. But we got to remember he's not racing in South Africa. He's racing on the world stage. So I think in many ways we had to dial that back, but we're seeing a much better version of Darren Binder. The sad part is it did take a lot of that confidence away, which he's slowly starting to get back. And I'm just glad this incident didn't blow up into a Dixon thing where, he was involved in the championship and he took a Gura. None of that incident. Let's move on from it. The big talking point, or another big talking point, was the Morbidelli move on Quartararo in the main race on Sunday. Talking about riders being labelled, Morbidelli has been one of these labelled riders. Let's just say, he's been in race direction more often than not. He's been caught riding slow multiple times, on fast laps. He's always involved in some kind of incident. He was obviously really confident and up for this. You could see it was a move like, Quartararo, on your stupid Yamaha, get out of my way. I'm on a Ducati. I'm going for this. It was that move. 1 lap, long lap penalty. which he railed. Listen, I must take my hat off to Morbidelli.
Yeah.
Yes, he went faster in the long lap than he did on the track to knee down everything. But again, a couple of comments here about the inconsistency is the most frustrating thing about everything. You know, that I suppose getting back to the Darren and Agura, if it was Darren, it would have been a penalty. Agura, no. That's the inconsistency. That's the frustrating part of it. The frustrating part for that Morbidelli incident, for me, it was clear and obvious what Franco did. One long lap, to me, that's minimum 2 long lap, or even, you know what, my bad, you're just disqualified. Just you want to do that kind of thing. Just it's a red card in football.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Rob, you've kind of, I don't want to say you've grown to like Morbidelli, but as the seasons progressed, you were very, I'm going to say pro Morbidelli, because you had the incident before testing even started, and you said, give the guy a chance, give him a chance. But then he does stupid things. Like you said, he rides slowly in qualifying on the racing line. This isn't his first rodeo. He's a world champion. He's been in the game for a hell of a long time. Then he pulls a move like that. I mean, it was blatant. It was stupid.
Yeah.
It was idiotic. But most importantly, it was dangerous. You know, thank heavens Quartararo didn't get injured. Yeah, he's going to be battered and bruised, no doubt. That always happens when you fall off your motorcycle doing whatever it was, 140, 150 k's an hour. But there was no broken wrist. There was no broken collarbone. So in hindsight, Quartararo got away with it quite likely. But Morbidelli's an idiot. You know, we've seen this from him time and again, and I agree with you. When the thing came up saying long lap penalty, I was like, no, guys, you've got to be kidding. You know, he should have got 2 long lap penalties. A red card system, you know what they should do is a thing like that, straight, immediate ride through the pits. That's it, done. So that negates, that's probably 4 long lap penalties. So yeah, you're quite right. The inconsistency is an issue. I agree with you fully. Simon will be a lot better at it, but I think they need to start saying, okay, almost a red card system. You know, they did have the point system. I don't know if that still works, but say, okay, you've had 1 long lap penalty, then you get 2. But if you knock the rider off, you know, that's like in, you know, rugby are now doing it, to mention another sport. So they used to have a red card, you were off the pitch no matter what. Now it's only I think a 10-minute or maybe even a 20-minute period on a red card. Then you come back on. So instead of bombing the oak out the race, give him a ride through for his next infringement. You know, so because what are you going to lose there? 40 seconds? So yeah, I don't know, but they need to. And I'm sure there are ground rules stating exactly what the punishments are. But, you know, because it's racing, it's not so cut and dry, because what happens in a fast corner is different to what happens in a slow corner. So, yeah, very difficult one. But it was just such a, you know, almost like a desperation lunge, you know, and he was way faster. He probably needed half a lap to pass Quartararo or back to the straight where the Ducati had so much drive out at turn 12. He would have sailed past him. But anyway, you know, I think his brain sometimes, and when you look at him in the pits, we always think he's got a very calm demeanor. I just think sometimes that lift only stops on the 8th floor and it's a 10-story building. Because I think sometimes he just glazes over and he's like, you know, he's in a trance almost. Anyway, yeah, he's never been my favorite guy. Just because he does silly things and he just, I don't know, he's just got a funny way about doing things. I mean, he doesn't seem to be too much of a team player either. So I don't know. You've obviously been in debriefs, spoken to him, interviewed him. I've never even had a word with the guy, but he just comes across as someone that you just stay away from him.
Yeah, a lot of people liking the idea of your ride-through penalty. Paul will talk about that now. Olimoto says, Morbidelli is not a serial offender when it comes for incidents like this. His brain fade on the racing line, and that is something, but he isn't someone who dives bomb. Bit of double standards here. You know what it needs to be. Okay, I like the idea of the ride-through penalty. I think the biggest thing they do with that in terms of the pits is because there's varied pit lanes, you know, like Kota will take you 4 days to get through that pit lane, whereas Valencia might be a bit quicker. And it's really unjustified because it has no kind of level ground in terms of an actual penalty. I like the idea of very much like, you know, football or rugby or something. Let's say you get you get a long lap penalty this race weekend. If you get a long lap penalty, regardless of what it is, the next race weekend, that's 2 yellow cards. next time there's no long lap penalty. It's you pit, not even ride through, not even you box. Right, Frankie Morbidelli, this is your 4th offence, so that's technically your 2nd red card. You're going in the pits, my bud. Black flag, you're in the pits. I think that's the way to really curb it, because I said the long lap penalty, okay, it does impact you, but you're still in the race. Still in the race. I mean, Morbidelli on a Ducati in those situations, give me a penalty because it'll take me 3 laps to pass the Yamaha, the Ducati, and the KTM. So, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'll still probably finish 4th. It's management of it all, though. It's how do you manage it, and it's someone to be on top of it at every occasion.
You see what the other problem is, Rob? You tell this to Carmelo Espeleta that you're going to have 1, maybe even 2 or 3 bikes off the grid on the same weekend. He's going to poo in his pants because he wants to see 22 or more bikes on the grid when we've got wildcard riders thrown in at the same time. There's obligations by the factories to have 2 bikes on the grid at every single race. Obviously, we know the impact. If a rider gets injured this weekend and they're racing next weekend, there's no time to substitute. But for the weekend thereafter, they have to have a substitute rider to fill in for that. So I understand that our thinking, I think, is along the right lines. But there's more to it than that. So, how do we overcome this? I don't know. I agree. I think it was Oli Moto who said maybe Morbidelli is not a serial offender. But I think he is, but maybe not dive bombing Oaks all the time. He just serial offender he loses his focus, his concentration at times, and it causes incidents. Maybe not always running an Oak off the track, but then slowing down on the racing line. So it's a very difficult one, Rob. And I look forward to Simon. I think he'll bring a sense of calm, because I think what's happened at the moment, you have a serious division: those that are happy with Freddie Spencer and his management, and those that are absolutely not. I don't think there's too much common ground or middle ground. I think with Simon, because of just who he is, his demeanor, his approachability, you can't say his racing expertise, because he's got less racing expertise in terms of ability than a Freddie Spencer. But Freddie Spencer doesn't seem to have linked 1983 Moto World Champion to 2024, where Simon seems to have, his brain has kept up with it. I'm not saying Freddie hasn't, not for 1 second, but Simon just seems to be a lot more on top of things. Saying that, we're also talking out of turn because we haven't heard Freddie's comments on live TV. We hear Simon. So we know his rationale and his thinking, which I think is a good thing going forward.
Okay, so let's just break it down without going too much into detail. Try like simple yes or no and a little bit of an explanation. Starting with Moto3, the Colin Via incident coming towards the line, taking out the young Japanese rider. I can never remember his name. No, not Yamamoto. It's God, I can never remember his name. Honda Asia rider. Anyway, he takes him out, and I was actually on the phone with my boss before I came live. My boss here in the UK, and he said,
Yamanaka, isn't it?
No, it's not Yamanaka. It's
okay. Anyway,
it'll come to me. Someone will put it in the comments now. Furusato, Robert Mackey.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
beautiful Scottish kilt-wearing man. Furusato is the man. So anyway, Dale Robinson said to me, Rob, I'm sure the rule used to be you had to cross the line on your motorcycle to get, classified as finished. And Furusato was classified at, as 5th, and he was nowhere near on his motorcycle. Now, I had to kind of go, did they give him the result because he was taken out by Colin Via? I don't even know. Does anyone know? Did Colin Via even get a penalty for that? Because that was...
No. But I'm going to say that was 100% a racing incident. Eh?
You think so? No, I think
Colin
Via knows what he's doing, and he knows I can almost polish this off as a racing incident. I'm going to just kind of go wide. Yeah, I don't know.
Was it Holgado? It wasn't Holgado. One of them had run wide from 2nd to drop to 4th or 5th. So I think that when Via saw that, and he thought, here's my gap. So he just gassed it, clipped the front wheel, and that was the end of it. So, I don't know. I don't know if he deserved the penalty for that.
They said the last to pass the line, bike or person. He crossed the line with his bike not on it. Okay.
Initially,
on the screen.
But initially, the commentator said you have to cross the line, you and your bike. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. I just thought, look, they've both crossed the line, so surely the result must stand. The fact that one was on the one side and the other was on the other side of the track, difficult one. So they gave him his 5th place.
Okay, so again, split decisions. I'm saying I don't think it was a racing incident. I think Colin Vire knew it was a situation he could polish off as a racing incident. Going across him, you're saying racing incident, and I can understand why you would say that because of how it all played out. I don't think it. Mariska Hutchinson doesn't think that. A couple of people agreeing with you, a couple of people agreeing with me. Great. We're just trying to unlock the inconsistency here of it all. No penalty for Colin Vire, and Furusato was accredited with 5th. They both crossed the line. That's Brian Ritchie. So no penalty for Colin Vire. I don't agree with. I think he should have got, because he took the situation in his own hands and the way it played out. Okay, you're the other side. The other incident then was, and this is where race direction does frustrate the hell out of you, and this is where you do get into the myth, kind of, as Spanish riders being looked after. In the comments, please, everybody. It was Ortola, Peter Gomini. Thank you. It was Ortola that broke himself into oblivion and ran wide. Yeah. Marc Marquez on Joan Mir. Marc Marquez running right up the arse of Pecco Bagnaia in the main race, had clearly the better pace, did this beautiful front wash, Marc Marquez style, knee-out holding it, goes over this mountain of a curb that they now have as curbs all over the world, crashes, picks it up and gets going again. Then with his pace gets up into this group with Mir, Marini and everyone. He then just kind of does almost like a Frankie Morbidelli in a way to me. Goes, I've got more pace. I'm on a Ducati, get out of my way. And misjudges it completely. Not as brutal as the Morbidelli one, but in the same way. And then gets a drop the position. That I didn't understand. Why Mark? And I'm keen to hear you, Paul, because you are a Mark fan. I'm a Mark fan, but I looked at it and went, geez, this is double standards if I've ever seen. Because, yes, Frankie should have got double long lap, as a lot of people have said in the comments here. Mark should have got at least a long lap penalty for that. Drop one position. No.
No, he did nothing wrong. It was a racing incident. No, you're quite right, Rob. And that's the inconsistency of the rules. Surely he should have got a long lap penalty.
Yeah.
Drop. The fact that Mir didn't crash, I mean, he barged him out the way, as blatant as can be. Doesn't matter how slow the rider in front of you is. He has every right to be there. He's in a race.
Yeah.
It's not like they were lapping Mir and he didn't get out the way. He was ahead of Mark. Mark had made his own problems. So, I wasn't unhappy, but he was certainly lucky to get away with it. Minimum, he should have got a long lap penalty. But you see, he's very clever. So he pulls the move. He gets told to drop one place. By then he had overtaken, I think it might even have been Morbidelli. But anyway, then he drops back one place. Didn't even have to worry about Mir. So he knows how to manipulate the rules. He didn't drop back behind Mir, which I think then they said he would have had to wait 3 seconds. So, but anyway, the point is we need the consistency. Whether it's your favorite rider or your worst rider, we want to know that when he does something the same as Frankie Morbidelli, the Morbidelli incident had a worse consequence for Quartararo.
Yeah.
That's just how it played out. But the incident was the same. And if I remember correctly, exactly the same corner. Maybe Mark got hold of Mir at a better point of contact. So he didn't skittle. I think Morbidelli hooked Quartararo's arm and that just pulled him off the bike. Where at least Mark rubs properly against you and then just nerfs you out the way. But the inconsistency. So, I think we'll see the end of it from next year. That's all we want. Consistency. And if it happens to be your favorite rider or your least favorite rider, well, so be it. It will cut these things down, because I think that was really, it's in poor taste. Mark has been going so well. He created the problem. He knows exactly why he fell over. Then to come back, he's trying to get as many points. What for? I actually don't know. He's not going to win the championship, but he could have waited. Same story as Morbidelli on Quartararo. 3 corners, 4 corners later, you're going to blitz the Oak. I think they do, a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of, I deserve that space, you don't. And it's, there could be consequences at a later point to someone in a bad way, and we don't want to see that.
Yeah, that's ultimately what we're trying to avoid, and what MotoGP and Dorna, to be fair, are trying to avoid. It's just the management of it sometimes, and like I said, the inconsistency. So a lot of people agreeing in the comments here, and whenever you talk about Marc Marquez, it just goes boom. There's just like this massive talking point. Mark's just this massive talking point. So a lot of people agreeing it should have been a long lap. A lot of people, angry that he's always doing this kind of thing. He does this. But everyone, get your digital apples ready, because there is one person that doesn't agree with us. Robert Swart, how could you? Mir didn't crash. Also, Mir just lent on him. How are you going to give Mark a long lap when he didn't wipe someone out? So now, Robert, I hear what you're saying, and I could understand that's probably why, Mark got away with a slapping on the wrist, rather, because Mir didn't actually crash, and Race Direction are saying, okay, as you said, Paul, it's the same thing. He went in there kind of with the same, brain fade as Franco. The outcome was different, but the intent, not the intention, the incident was the same. The outcome wasn't, but the incident was the same. And it's because of the corner and that. So maybe that's what Race Direction, and this is the other frustrating part about Race Direction. Interview Freddie Spencer afterwards and say, right, why did Mark not get it? Well, This is how we saw it. Mir did not crash. Mir lent on him. That we took the corner into consideration. Then we would go, okay, you know what? Fair is fair. All right, I understand. Yeah. But because nothing is said about it, then we just go, well, bang, 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 and play it out. So, Robert Swart, we're going to throw some digital apples at you first. Then we're going to retract them and go, you know what? You're probably looking at it the way that Race Direction did. And if you look at it that way and you break it down that way, then maybe. But then at the same time, there's the Olimoto argument, whereas Mark did this to Mir at Jerez earlier in the year. This is Marc Marquez. We talk about this label. He should have the biggest label on him out of everyone, because this is what he does. The Pecco Bagnaia incident at Portimao. How did that? There's so many instances you could take in. So it's just that inconsistency again that we could go on and go. Robert Swart, no, I agree with you. Should have been long lap, but because they gave Franco a long lap, they couldn't give more or less. That's Robert coming back. I think it's the error that pulled Mark in. Kevin Pereira, I think it's the error that pulled Mark in. Simon Crayfar will be the level head next year. Adam Sweeting, I think that's pretty much where we can end that whole discussion. That's
I just want to ask Rob, is the name Robert Swart a synonym for Freddie Spencer? We need to just check this in the comments here from that first comment he posted. That's his digital apple. No, Robert Swart, I'm just kidding. Eh?
Yeah. Johnny Martins, Paul, is that why you're not wearing your red cap tonight?
I had it lined up until he lost the front end and he didn't save it. And I know, what's the guy's name that just commented now, Rob?
Johnny Martins.
Yeah, Johnny, I know you don't like my hat. And just to let you know, you can get them cheap at Broomer Flea Market. Ask Sheridan Moraes.
Oh, Sheridan and James, they'll go pick it up for you.
There we go. Yeah.
Brad has also done the drop the positions. Just strategically can't remember where. Maybe Valencia last year. Peter Garman, you're right. Freddie Spencer Fred Star is going to join the chat soon. That's from Olimoto. Okay, let's dive into the actual racing of the weekend. We've got this massive championship fight. It's now official that it's just between Martin and Pecco. We kind of knew that, heading into this weekend already, although Bastianini put up a great fight in the sprint race. Mark was putting up a great fight in the main race. And then anyway, it's down to Martin and Pecco. Now I want to dissect this a bit. I watched on Saturday the sprint race. I'm not going to go into qualifying and whatever. I saw a big statement from Martin on the Saturday sprint race. I saw Martin coming out Rocky Balboa style. Rocky, I don't know which one it is, Rocky 2 or whatever, where he fights Dolph Lundgren, who's much taller, bigger than him, and the champion, and whatever. Just murders him the first time, and then afterwards trains harder, and then just goes old school, bully, dig, Boston, dig deep, and just come out and just fight, just really fight and put it all on the line. I saw that from a Martin on Saturday. Got the start already. Started the fight at the first corner. Knew that Pecco was going to get there. Went, you're not getting this first corner, which in some ways. I watched that and I thought, you know what, that turn one at Thailand gets me a little bit, because if I'm Pecco, I'm pissed off, because it allows Martin to go in and he can just disrupt the whole thing and then run into the green paint, knowing that. Right, I'll take that green paint. Same with Red Bull Ring. Okay, I'll dive bomb into turn one, knowing I'm not going to make the corner, but it's okay. I've got this green paint to use. So that irritates me a little bit, because if that green paint was grass, different situation, So anyway, I got it. If I was Pecco, I'd be pissed off. But if I'm Martin, I'm going, I'm playing within the rules.
Yeah.
I'm playing rough, but you know what? This is my ball and I want this ball. So anyway, they already kind of gets it. But then Sacrifice is coming out because he normally got more than that. He rolls the throttle off, loses positions. Pecco then goes on the ascendancy. Cool. Pecco. And now Bastianini's loving life and he's just checking out. Pecco's going, oh God, please. I don't want any help in the title, but actually, please. And I do need help.
Slow down.
And Naya says, bugger you, I'm going to KTM. I ain't helping you. Sweet. And that's another point that we'll talk about just now. Then Martin goes on this, and I put it on Facebook, and Stephen Berry used the perfect words, ragged. Martin was just ragged. He was all over the place. But that's what I wanted to see from Pecco. Martin bullied Pecco, and Martin won the sprint race. And I looked at that and I went, gee, that's a big statement from Martino, because he's had that incident. He's come from behind Pecco, who qualified in pole, broke the record, was looking. When Pecco is like that, you're not going to stop Pecco.
Yeah.
Yes, I know it was a sprint race, whatever. But Martin, despite where he's in the championship, he could have easily just not risked as much and finished behind Pecco and lost 1 or 2 points. Sweet, no problem. He put it all on the line. He bullied Pecco, and Pecco did not fight back to me. Especially how he passed Pecco. It was a bully pass, and Pecco just didn't say, okay, there you have it. But, straight away, a Mark or a Brad, or just fight back. Pecco, I know he's not that guy. He's more meticulous. He's more thought out. He's, I just saw it as Rocky Balboa on Saturday. Martin went, this is my championship. If you want to win it, you're going to have to get dirty, and we're going to have to turn this into a street fight. And Pecco just didn't do that on the Saturday.
Yeah, I part of me says yes, I agree fully with you. Martin was almost desperate, and Bastianini, all credit to him. They gave him a second in the first 2 or 3 laps, and he was gone. And he didn't buck. Well, he had no pressure, so there was no need. He could ride his race, his lines. Going back to Pecco, Rob, since the sprint started last year, we know Pecco hasn't been the dominant factor in sprint racing. Without a doubt, it's been Martin. So possibly Pecco said, yeah, the worst I do is I lose 2 points. I'm not throwing it away for 2 points.
Yes.
I've got my setup, my confidence, my bike right for Sunday. We've seen it on numerous occasions. Saturday, Martin blitzes everybody. Sunday, Pecco comes and picks his A game and blitzes everybody the other way around. So to me, I don't know if his head was just saying, I'm quite happy with it. Happy being relative. Please understand, he's never happy with being behind Martin. But I think maturity-wise, we saw the mature, ragged, as someone said, Martin, without a doubt. I mean, look at him. He should have had track limit warnings. He was on the absolute edge. Pecco looked reserved.
Yeah.
Whether it was defeatist or reserved, very fine line. We don't know what's going on in his head. But so I think you're right and you're wrong, because what you said about Martin on Saturday being Rocky Balboa, well, Sunday, Pecco was Godzilla, and he came out, I mean, not the best race we've ever seen Sunday, but the tension, because 11 Oaks crash in the race, the conditions are unbelievable. You have to be pinpoint accurate, corner. You don't know the grip levels, they're changing. So contradicting Saturday and Sunday for Pecco, definitely in his favor on Sunday, obviously. But what you're saying about this championship, Rob, and I'm still on the fence. When I see Martin blitz him like that, I'm like, go boy, this is lacquer. And then I see the Pecco on Sunday, who comes out and just says, Mark, you can challenge me as much as you want. Pass me, I'll pass you straight back. Pass me again, I'll pass you straight back. When he didn't have to worry about Mark, he could have said, listen, off you go. So I think this championship is actually better than last year, in that they've both matured, they're both more desperate for different reasons. And I think the next 2 weekends are going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, Paul, listen, I'm going to finish off. We've got a lot to talk about Pecco on Sunday. I've got a lot of praise to throw his way, him and Martin. Coming out of this weekend, just when you think you can't have any more respect for these guys, all of them, in fact, but especially Martin and Pecco, because of everything that's on the line, to do what they did. I mean, I was left speechless. I sat there with butterflies in my stomach on Sunday. I couldn't sit on that couch. I was like, and they were sitting on their motorbikes doing what they did in those conditions. It just showed what true superhumans they are. But anyway, the Saturday, to finish the Saturday argument, I saw Martin that was prepared to go Rocky Balboa and dig deep. I saw Pecco, like you said, reserved. I also think there might have been, Pecco mentioned it afterwards, he saw Martin run on the curb 4 times. Maybe it was a Pecco thinking, cool, I'm not going to fight back because this guy's going to get a penalty anytime soon. All that. And we can talk for hours about, did he run on? For me, he ran onto the green. Yes, the high curbs came to his rescue because it didn't activate on the green paint, which is down here, the sensor, and he went on. So anyway, it's another grey area of MotoGP that they need to somehow fix it, because it was Martin taking full advantage. The rule book says this. I did this. I got away with it. Sweet. Pecco, unfortunately, okay, I didn't get away with it. Martin got away with it. We can go on about that forever. What's done is done. I'm talking about
I just wanted to highlight, remember last year, Brad got 2 penalties for going on the green. And Pecco went more blatantly on the green, but it didn't trigger the sensor. And he didn't moan about that, boy. He kept very quiet. So now this weekend was kind of a little bit of pot kettle black, so just to highlight that point.
Okay, listen, I didn't even think about it that way, but I agree. But this is where I think, and I spoke about it back then, the MotoGP directors, or that, can't trust technology for everything. Look what we are seeing. Look, 100%. He's taking advantage. He's run on the rules, so you can't give him a penalty. Whether the sensor went off or not, use your human element. Then I'll come into Sunday. Martin won the battle on Saturday. There's still an ultimate war here that's going to go to Valencia. Martin won the battle on Saturday. And you could see by the way he celebrated, it was just, this is where Martin's going to win this championship this year. Not by finishing first. Pecco's now done that 9 times. Martin's done it 4 times. I'm talking main race or whatever. But by finishing second, and he did it again. And to me, it was a slap in the face almost of Pecco. It was like, you got pulled. It was your ideal situation. Take that. Sunday, as you said, this is where you kind of go, geez, I've always had massive respect for Martin. I've never, and I don't think I ever will subscribe to his fan club. But after Saturday, I went, I've always been the underdog. I've loved the Rocky kind of mentality. The Tiger was playing, in the back of my mind. Sweet. Martin's the man. Martin. Then Pecco comes out and did what he did on Sunday. With, as you said, with Marc Marquez, got nothing to lose, on his ass, passing him on the brakes. And when Mark did those moves, I just pictured that front tucking and him taking Pecco out. And I thought, you're going to finally shave his unibrow because he's had enough. But I just saw everything playing out. Didn't. Pecco keeps his cool, squares it up, and pulls that trigger. And for Pecco Bagnaia is the height of cool, calm, collected. This is where my discrepancies with him on Saturday. You've got to dig deep and be more bullish and get out of your comfort zone, you arsehole. Then on Sunday, he shows me why he's this champion and why he is this guy that he's just the suit and tie of a champion. He's got a bit of Rossi, he's got a bit of Lorenzo. He's just this all-in-one package where Martin brings in a bit of Marquez, and the brute side, Pecco just keeps it all controlled. And he was just mature, cool as ice, controlled, I think was the big word. He just didn't let anything fuss him. And while we are all sitting on the couch, screaming at the TV, losing our minds, losing our thought process, butterflies going everywhere, this guy just kept it all under control, with gazillions watching, in front of all of them, in these conditions that just you have no control of. And he pulled it, and he picked up the win. And then I went, exactly like what you said. Saturday I went, okay, you know what? I want the underdog Martin to win this. Bugger it. I've never said that, and I've been the biggest guy to come out and say, why doesn't Martin have fans? And now he's not going to win this. Saturday I went, right, Martin's going to win this. Not necessarily I want him to win it, but he's going to win it. Then Sunday I go, no. Pecco cap back on. This guy is just, if my son was racing now, and I want, I had to show him a rider that this is what you do. It's the best of both, Martin and Pecco. You want a bit of that Martin aggression, but overall, what wins titles in the overall picture, and this is why Pecco's still got to be taken seriously, is what Pecco did on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. You've summed it up perfectly. His temperament, that's why I say he's always been better on a Sunday. Yes, he's won a few sprints, but he's always been whether he sets his bike up during all the qualifying and practicing sessions specifically for Sunday, I think that's what he does. He knows exactly what he wants from the bike, tire wear. Obviously, this weekend was a bit different because now they're running rain tires. But under those conditions, remember, as the leader of the race, and you know this having raced, he gets to the drying track or the more wet track first before anyone else. Like Martin said, if Mark hadn't have crashed in that corner, he was down because he knew they were going too fast for that corner. Then he saw Mark crash, so he knew he had to back off. I think that was the point where Pecco, he just kept doing, and if you looked at his lap times, man, the consistency was unbelievable in those conditions. Rob, we saw it. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think it was Bezecchi on the first lap. I think 5 times he was out of the seat.
Yeah.
And that's just trying to learn the conditions, and I understand lap 1, lap 2, you got to feel where you are. But that's how treacherous it was. The minute they cracked that throttle, you didn't know what was going to happen. And Pecco was, just to, first of all, to fight off Mark the way he did, because of the fact that Mark had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
He could have easily said, off you go. You can have the win. I'm in this for as you said, the war, not the battle today. But he didn't. He said, no, bugger you, chum. I'm winning this race. Absolutely superb for a race that once Mark had crashed, that didn't actually have lots of, for the top 2, overtaking. The tension, I agree with you fully, Rob. You couldn't keep your eye off the little screen when they showed, and in a battle that was happening. It was just unbelievable because you knew these conditions, anything can happen. And Pecco has shown us he's had 7 crashes this season in racing conditions. He's prone to doing that more than Martin. So I tell you what, the tension for a not so fantastic close race was unbelievable. But Pecco, once again, he just put himself on a pedestal. Not to say Martin had a bad day, but Martin had 0 answer. 0, 0, 0.
I think in Tumaleng, Morakile sums it up perfectly. Pecco is a strategist. So, as I saw that comment, I just thought it's the perfect, and we've all probably been in it in work situations. You get, those managers that manage you by the book. Now, this is how you do things. This is how you got to do things, and that's Pecco. And then you get those managers that, I'll do things by the book, but hang on, in this situation, you know what? Bugger the book. I'm going a bit rogue to get the job done. We got to do this.
Yeah,
and it works out. That's it, and that's the pure difference between the two. Pecco is by the book, meticulous, and whatever. Martin does that, but when he needs to, is prepared to turn into Rocky. And I think Pecco, this is something that Pecco has now got to do. He cannot afford to lose one more race to Jorge Martin. And before I get into the next line of that comment, on top of everything we've just said about Pecco and how good he was on Sunday, which is well valid, the same can be said for Martin in second place on Sunday, because he was again ragged. He lost the front. He got dropped back. He was at the front. He was that Rocky Balboa thrown in the ring, but kind of confused, like, with a bit, oh my God, geez, what? And he also had to fight with the Mark. The best thing that happened to Martin was Marquez crashing. The best thing that happened to both of them was Marquez crashing. But Martin just wasn't there. And he knew that, okay, in these conditions, I can't do what I did on Saturday because I will land on my head, even though he did his best to land on his head with everything he did. But this new Martin, 24 model Martin, pulled it all together, whether he took a deep breath in his helmet or whatever, or where that front end tuck or the mark, brought it back and went, I don't have to beat this guy. I can officially finish second behind Pecco in every single race, and I will be world champion. And that was the difference. And that's where, again, I tip my head off to Pecco more so on Sunday, but also Martin deserves praise, because that was a championship winning, in the current state of things, there was a championship winning performance again by Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're now at the very sharp end of this championship, and neither of them can afford to make a mistake. Martin's advantage, as you've just said, is he can afford to finish second to Pecco. He now has to have the mindset that one place behind Pecco is the worst result he can have. Does he have to fight with Pecco? If he's got way more out and out pace in any of the 2 sprints or races that are remaining, I think he's going to show Pecco just to try and stamp his authority. Does he need to do that? That's a question that he has to answer. I don't believe we can answer it for him, because if you're a Martin fan, you're going to say, listen, go out there and blitz them like he did the middle towards the end of last season. But then it cost him because he made mistakes. This year, as you've said, we need to see Jorge Martin 2024.0 version. That is, this is going to be unbelievable. I can't believe that we've got to the same point as last year, but both riders have upped their game. Both riders are more mature. It's going to be phenomenal. I just hope, and I don't know if you listened to the Oxley Bomb podcast from this weekend, they're just saying, please let us have 4 races of good weather. That's all we want, because then I think it will be a fair championship. You don't want someone to crash out on a changing condition track. I understand they all get the same, but I'd like it to be sunny, 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 and let the best man win, because then we'll be in for one hell of a ride.
Yeah, Lance Jonas, I love this comment where he says Pecco is like a modern day Eddie Lawson, perfect. And in many ways, if I think back, one of my favorite riders from that era was Wayne Gardner, and he had a bit of that Martin. He was precise in that when he needed to be, but if he needed to get unsettled and just risk things, he would. And I think Martin's got that kind of mold, but definitely, Lance, I love that comparison to Eddie Lawson. Now, going back to my point of earlier, just before I went on to that comment, is Pecco's in this very hard predicament now, where it's not like years gone by when Rossi was going against Hayden and those kind of title championships where there were 3 or 4 guys that could potentially win. Danny Pedrosa, Lorenzo, there's 4 guys that can win on this grid if the conditions, as you say, are in perfect conditions. Pecco Bagnaia, Jorge Martin, Marc Marquez, and Enea Bastianini. Realistically, maybe Frankie Morbidelli because he's on GP24. Those are the 4 guys. So Pecco has got to rely on not being beaten by these 2 guys, because they've come out and said, we're not going to help this guy. Pecco said, I don't want to win a championship that way. Whether that's going to change now at Malaysia, whether that mapping 8's going to come out, that's still a big question. How does Mark play this? And they he's been let go by Ducati. He's going to KTM. It's really the ball's in his court. Does he want to be nice to Pecco? Has he been a nice teammate? Did he feel loved by Ducati enough? That's up to him. Mark's got the tricky situation now because he's being signed by that very team. What does he do? But what I'm trying to get at is that Martin knows he's going to be in that front 3. Martin's always going to be in the front 3. Pecco is always going to be in the front 3. But that's not good enough for Pecco. Martin's in this luxurious position. You know what? Okay, Mark, you go win. No, you go win. All I have to do is either just one position, beat Pecco, or worst case, finish one position behind him. And who's going to challenge me? If I finish 4th and Pecco finishes 3rd, sweet, no problem. The next spark is a KTM or DG's gone or a bit, they're miles back. It's the 4 of us now. So this is where I think Pecco needs to turn into Rocky now. He cannot afford to lose one race. He cannot afford to be this meticulous, strategic guy in a sprint race now. There's 2 more sprint races left. He's got to win both. There's 2 more main races. He's got to win both. Martin does not have to. So this is going to be interesting to see how Pecco. We've never seen Pecco have to go out of his comfort zone. His extreme comfort zone. We've seen him like once or twice come from behind, and but now he's really got to get out of his comfort zone. He can't be this precise guy throughout the whole weekend. If things aren't going right on the Friday, there's a lot more management now for Pecco to do than Martin.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I hear exactly what you're saying. So does Pecco come out of his comfort zone on Saturday in the sprint race and go balls to the wall to beat Martin and risk crashing? Or does he do what he's comfortable with if he needs to, finish one place behind Martin and hope that on Sunday someone gets between Martin and him if he wins, Pecco, that is? Yeah, it's a very difficult one. going to your point on the mapping 8 story, I honestly hope we don't see that. I honestly do. If there's a personal relationship between Bastianini and Pecco, and Bastianini chooses to, when I say help, I can't see him leading a race and with 3 corners to go, moving over and letting Pecco win. I can't see that happening. Maybe, but maybe he gets between Pecco and Martin, and where he could beat Pecco, he chooses not to. I think I would rather it comes from the riders themselves than a mapping 8 story, because then it's Ducati interfering. If it's the riders, that's a relationship that the 2 riders have built. So, to me, that would be, is it more fair? I don't know. Marc Marquez in this equation doesn't give a toss. He signed his contract for next year and the year after. He's going to race as hard as he can. He might 0.001% of his brain might say, don't take either of them out if you have the opportunity to pass. Might. I wouldn't put my house on it. But so I think the only one who may get help is Pecco from Bastianini. The problem with Bastianini, Rob, he blows so hot and cold. He could blitz them by 4 seconds in the sprint and then finish 14th in the main race, a la this past weekend. Or, you just don't know what you're going to get with him, as we've discussed. So, I don't know. It's a difficult one. Martin definitely has the upper hand in terms of he can literally follow Pecco around for the next 4 races. Whether his brain will allow him to do that or not, I don't know. That's also not in his DNA. As you say, yes, he's mature, but his DNA says, well, if I can put a pass on him, I think I'll just do it anyway. So I don't know. It's going to be, it's interesting. As I say, I just hope Ducati, Gigi and his connections don't interfere. That's my only wish. Let the riders sort it out.
And, I agree with you. And I do like it when Pecco comes out and says, I don't want team orders in that. But with MotoGP, where it is surely, if Martin was staying at Ducati, surely, if it gets down to Valencia, main race Sunday, and if Pecco wins and Martin finishes 3rd, Pecco's champion. If it gets down to this situation. So there's a Marc or a Bastianini in 2nd. Or Bezzecchi or someone, as Mariska says. I think for Bezzecchi and that it's an easier choice.
Yeah.
But for Marc and Enea Bastianini I'm talking about, surely Ducati have got to step in and go, God, we can't. Yes, we win the championship. Ducati still gets the glory. Martin wins the championship on a Ducati. So yes, the number 1 plate goes to Aprilia, but it was won on a Ducati. So, that in many ways is irrelevant. But there's still a lot at stake here. So in that situation, I know it's easy for us to say no, and Ducati and Pecco say no, don't. Before you go out in that race and that situation plays up, surely someone goes, right, you get that map 8 ready. Because as soon as that situation exploits itself, you've got to put it on. And I don't care who Anaya thinks he is and who Mark thinks he is. They've got to play the game here. They've just got to. And surely as a professional, surely a Mark or Anaya does. I take away everything that's happened. Ducati signed Bez over Martin. Bastianini, over Martin. They gave him the opportunity. They gave him a lot of money. They won him races. They put him in this headlight to go to KTM and that. So he does owe Ducati. Mark, okay, Ducati didn't take him. Grassini took him, but Ducati took him over Martin and got rid of a whole team in terms of Pramac. So does he not owe them this in a way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's easy to say no. I also don't want it. There's a lot here. There's millions and millions, and there's just so much. It has to come into play, I'm saying.
No, absolutely, Rob. But then it goes back to what you and I have discussed numerous times. Are Ducati going to control the racing, if that's the right word, with their heads or with their hearts? And that's what it's going to boil down to. If it's going to be with their heads, then they're going to start messing around with mapping 8 and mapping this. If it's with their hearts, they're going to say to Bastianini and Pecco, listen, boys, I think if we're in the situation, Bastianini, your job is wingman to Pecco. I don't think Ducati are going to have that conversation with Martin. I don't think they're going to sit the two of them, Martin and Bagnaia, down and say, listen, boys, we want a clean battle. I think Ducati are going to favor Bagnaia plus Bastianini. They might go to Marc Marquez and say, listen, you know what's on the line here. You stay out of this. I don't know. I don't know if they will. I don't know. So it's such a difficult one. All I can say is I'm glad we don't have to make those decisions, because what would you do? I just hope that it comes down to a fair fight, and the guy, because it's going to definitely come down to Valencia unless one of them crash this coming weekend.
Yeah.
And specifically Sunday race, because that's where the bigger points are. Let's presume all things being equal, Pecco wins Saturday, Sunday. We go to Valencia with a 11-point gap. I think that's what, or 12-point gap would be what it is. Can we say to Ducati, please let these oaks race for the championship? Your logic is spot on. They could be losing the number one plate to, first of all, to a satellite team, which we know is defunct as a Ducati team, but then to a rider who's moving to their opposition. So the logic says, no, Ducati have to interfere here. The sportsman side of me says, don't interfere. Difficult conundrum for everybody. What are the guys saying in the comments, Rob?
Let them race. Ivan Pulisic kind of just puts it perfectly. Let them race. Robert Swart, they are a team, so surely they can help. Again, Mark needs to remember that Ducati chose him over Martin, who's going to bring them a championship this year. So does he? I don't know. Francois Retief, no data sharing between Ducatis for the last two races would be great. Every man for himself. We've, Paul, spoken about that. I think I mentioned it where I said I would like to get to a point where they go, right, Pecco, you do your thing. Martin, you do your thing. That's it. No one shares anything. No one between the two of you, the championship contenders. Everyone else, Mark and whoever, that's fine. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think have you seen the photos of Mark's open suit? Brian Ritchie talking about Mark's open suit, and there was also a little bit of bone of contention. Fabio got the penalty. Fabio's zip was all the way down. Mark's was a little bit down, and his airbag had gone off. I don't know. I don't think it's as big of a headline as people are making it out to be. Wayne Taylor, if they interfere, it will detract from the Winners' Championship victory. I don't think the riders would want it. And that's exactly what Pecco's saying. Pecco's saying, I don't want help. I don't want to win it by this guy. I just think when crunch time comes Sunday at Valencia, and that situation presents itself, it's not going to be as easy to say that and make that decision. And it
might not be Pecco's decision. He might genuinely believe he wants no assistance, but Gigi and Tardozzi might pull Bastianini into a little back room and say, listen, look at the size of this check if you do X, Y, and Z. We don't know. So, very interesting. I agree with Wayne Taylor. We don't want to taint the championship in any way. And that story was about 4 years ago with the mapping 8. Everyone remembers that. So whether they say, no, we weren't manipulating, people do remember these things. And we've had a great fight. We've had a pretty fair fight. Equipment's identical. Skill levels may be different at different levels. So let's continue with, I believe, a fair fight. It's going to be one for the ages. That's for sure. There's absolutely no doubt. Probably the best championship we've had in, I don't know, 25, 30 years. I don't know.
Okay, Paul. So now here comes a real tricky question, which no one's really asked it to us. And I want to put this out to everyone. Let's kind of get a poll going here almost just to see what the split is. And it's from Shane Sparg. Guys, all these difficult outcomes aside, what do your guts say for who wins? So, Paul, I'm going to put this out to you first because I don't like to lead. I like to follow in some situations.
Yes. Shane,
go for it.
I've never, because neither of them are my favorite two riders. So everybody knows if it was Marc Marquez, I would say Marc's going to win. Done deal. If it was Brad Binder in with a fight, I'd say Brad's going to win. Done deal. Here we've got two guys who, not from weekend to weekend, but from qualifying session to qualifying session to sprint race to main race, they got me flip-flopping. Like you said, Saturday, Martin, just unbelievable. But to me, Pecco, the maturer ride, just did what he had to do. He knows he's preparing for Sunday. Then Sunday, Pecco does that under those conditions. Take nothing away from Martin. He was right there, made no mistakes. Now I'm thinking, yes, I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to say, for me personally, I'd like to see Martin win. Not because he's the underdog. And I mean, I'm saying this, which is contradicting my own thought pattern. I think he was hard done by Ducati twice in a row. I'm not justifying it. We spoke about 2022 to 23, his attitude, the things he said. Ducati they made the decision. Same again. So I'm just going to say, because I think they've done him a dirty 2 years in a row, I'm going to go with Martin. Has he got the temperament to do it? I don't believe he has. But I'm going to say, if we've got to put a number down now, I'm going to say Martin to win.
Jeez, that's pretty much everyone in the comments. Mariska Hutchinson, James Thompson, Carl Butch James, Robert Mackey, David Quigley, Wayne Taylor, Wimpy van der Berg, Jenny Blake. How about Mark and Anaya being a buffer between Pecco and Jorge? Trevor Dalglish, Martin will win. Robert Swart, Jorge Martin if he doesn't crash. Constantinius Pecco. There we go. Sean Carpus, Martin, I would love to see take the win. Lisa Esmond, Martin. Francois Retief, my least favorite ride, Martin is going to take it. Them melt away at Aprilia. Ivan Pelisic, Martin. Yeah, it's pretty much everyone going with the Martin factor. Paul Kruger, Ducati factory def going to interfere with VR46. Charmaine Follion, so agree with Paul. Ricky Brody, Martin. So yeah, I'm going to go.
You got to put yourself on the spot here, Rob.
Changing second by second here. It really is.
Yeah, for sure.
I am, to be honest, I'm more of a Pecco fan. I'm more of a Pecco fan. I just love what he does. I don't think he's made as many, like you said, silly comments and before and done silly things and that kind of thing that's kind of stopped me from being an outright Martin supporter. And I think a lot of people, as we've said so many times, why aren't there hashtag 89 banners and shirts and stuff being worn all over the place? You know, what more does this guy have to do to prove his worth as a MotoGP rider? He wins races. He's spectacular to watch. He's ridiculously fast, yet he still doesn't have the fan base and in many ways the respect as some other riders do, as Brads, Jacks, Acostas, you know, riders that he's beating week in, week out. And I don't know what it is. That's something missing to me, fully committing to Martin. I love the story for motorcycle racing, for MotoGP, of a Martin winning on a satellite team, an independent team, taking the number one with him to Aprilia, who, you know, would just be a coup for them. They've opened their door to him. He's made the big, you know, decision to leave Ducati and go with Aprilia. It's going to be Martin for me. I just think everything points in his favor. I don't think we're going to see a mistake from him. I think the cards are less stacked again. All he has to do is finish behind one position behind Pecco. The pressure's on Pecco. So, but I want Pecco to win. I'm going to say Pecco Bagnaia. I'm going to as a Pecco fan, I'm going to say my gut says Pecco as well. I just think he's going to be, you know, that strategic Eddie Lawson mentality might come into play. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to say Pecco Bagnaia. I could go on for days explaining my reasoning, but I'm going to say Pecco.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that, I mean, just discussing this now got my heart rate going. Imagine how these two feel when they actually, you know, I think for the next 3 days till Friday morning, when they actually go out for first free practice Friday morning, I think in their minds, they have to do everything to not think about the situation. Because me sitting here now, I'm wearing a Garmin watch. I can tell you now, my heart rate went up 10 beats. Just putting myself in their situation. And I'm not even going to be watching the thing live, never mind on TV. Imagine them when they actually, and you know what your mind's like, Rob, you're having dinner and suddenly in your head you're thinking, how am I going to beat this guy? You know, you get that cold sweat, so they've got to control these emotions. And I think that's going to be the difference. Yes, Martin, certainly I would prefer to go into the last 2 weekends with a 17-point advantage than disadvantage. But he's equally got to be mature enough and emotionally strong. And I mean, I'm just saying I'm getting worked up. Oh, come on, guys. And we got nothing to do with it, Rob, So I'd hate to know the emotion and the pressure in their own minds, not the pressure from the teams and everyone around them, just to keep focused, to first of all, to try not focus because you're burning energy. Then when you need to be focused, you have to be 100% focused. This is not a go there and be 98%. Now you have to be spot on. Whatever it's going to be, the next 50 or 60 laps that they're each going to do per weekend have to be pinpoint the 50 or 60 best laps they've put together this season. What they've done from March until now actually doesn't count. It starts on Friday morning. And it's going to be dynamic, I can tell you now. And then you've got to throw in the Bastianini, the Marquez. I agree with you. Good weather. I don't think we're going to see a Bezzecchi, a Morbidelli, a Brad Binder, Pedro Acosta, maybe for a short while, but race distance-wise, I think it's predominantly those four, but hopefully the two contenders with no interference or stupid mistakes from a Furman Aldegayer type move in turn one from any of them. So I just can't wait.
As Yaku, and this is what I love about this show, is that we deal with people with the same kind of thought pattern. Yes, we have a good conversation and we're diverse, but everyone kind of shares the same mentality, the same passion, the same everything. And as Yaku Swanepoel says here, because as soon as we were talking, I was like, how are these guys even sleeping? I mean, when I've got a little bit of stress with work stuff, I can't sleep. Mama, this is like 16 gazillion light years more pressure than that. And so again, it's as simple as whoever sleeps the night before. Something as simple as that could be the defining factor in this. Wayne Taylor's made the comment here, Paul, and a couple of people have commented already. If I was Aprilia, I wouldn't want the number one on my bike if we haven't earned it. I know it's the rider's number, but it just wouldn't sit well with me. And as Olimoto says, and I agree with him, Aprilia will 100% want that number one on, because they'll want as many pictures as Martin with a number one, put billboards up everywhere and that. But it is a good, entertaining question. As Olimoto says, Tommy Bridewell took it from Ducati onto his Honda. Honda loved it. They've just had the number one. They've had, they are the team to beat, the rider to beat. But it is an interesting kind of conundrum on what Martin will do. If he does win it, does he take his beloved number 89 and does he do a Marquez and a Rossi and just not go, or does he take the number one and say, well, if you Ducati, just look what I took and put it on that bike? It's going to be an interesting one. I don't know.
Yeah, Rob, it goes back to your point that you've made numerous times on this show. He doesn't have that fan base in the crowd that a Pecco, a Bastianini, a Marc Marquez has. He doesn't have that. Me personally, if I was him, I would get the biggest number one they can fit on that bike and slap it on the front, slap it on the side, stick it on my helmet. I'd actually run with a pure white helmet and stick the number one on to highlight it. His brand, yes, he is 89, and people who are enthusiasts know that. But if you're not an enthusiast, you would, and he does win and he goes to Aprilia. No one's, because remember, in all fairness, at least for a while, I'm going to say the whole season next year, he's going to be a 4th to 8th place runner, the way things are currently. I hope he turns that around, but realistically, I don't know if that's going to happen. But so, me personally, if I was him, I would emblazon that number one on that bike as big and as shiny as they can do it. That's what I would imagine that's what Aprilia would be hoping for.
Sean Portman, my brother, brings in a very valid point. The last race is in Spain as well. Martin's got that whole crowd in his corner, the whole nation's support compared to Pecco Bagnaia, although does he is still the question. I'm pretty sure Spain will, but it's
I don't think that's going to phase Pecco, to be quite honest. Yeah. Not the that it's not in Italy and it's a Spanish track. I can't see that phasing him. The way he is, as you say, so methodical, so regimental almost. He can put that out of his mind. That's not an issue to him. I think the Spanish riders, maybe, there are lots of them on the grid. Could Aleix Espargaro try and help? Well, he hasn't shown anything, maybe when they lap him, possibly. But I think it's going to be, a two-way battle, fair and square, and the best man's going to win.
Nice comment here from Shane. You two have got this program so good. I've watched so many other ones which are nowhere near as factual and to the point and unbiased. Big up to you both. Thank you so much, Shane, for joining us and for that nice comment. And then actually, Paul, Carlo Williams has just resolved everything for us. Okay. Morbidelli will have a brain fart moment and wipe out all game.
Yeah. And you'll only get a long lap penalty.
And a factory GP25, whatever you want.
And then he'll crash after the long lap penalty.
Yeah, no, listen, all jokes aside. You know what? We laugh. There's so many of those factors you have to take into it. Pedro Acosta, we know the talent that he is, and we're going to talk about him now. That's our last train of thought before the show ends. So don't worry, we're going to talk about KTM and everything. Pedro Acosta, Sunday, main race, Malaysia or Valencia, miraculously is digging deep and he's right there. He's not going to give 2 cents about a Martin and that. He's going to just throw that thing in as wild and as sideways as he possibly can. And who knows what the outcome will be. A Brad Binder, knowing Brad will do the right thing. Brad wouldn't get involved to that point of crashing. He would get involved to win, but he wouldn't be as reckless about it as Pedro doing.
Brad's fast at Valencia. His track record there is very good. And remember, we're going to go to Valencia where I'm going to say it's going to be dodgy conditions. It's the end of November. It's going to be 12, 14 degree track temperature, maybe 16 degrees. Temperamental conditions, which will certainly favor Brad, Pedro Acosta, Marc Marquez. So even if it's a sunny day, because remember, we are, I think, 2 weeks later than we were last week. So last year, sorry. So, it's not quite midwinter in Europe, but it's certainly not Joburg summer 35 degrees. So that's something to bear in mind. This weekend, different story. We could have torrential rain or we could have 38-degree heat. But 2 weeks later in Valencia, the conditions could play an effect.
Well, you see, now this is my other problem now, Paul. I'm in this beautiful position that I'm living in the United Kingdom now, and I'm a 2-hour flight away from this Valencia. And I promise you, I've never, obviously you want to go to as many MotoGP races as you can, but, you kind of go, and I've never really, yes, I now want to look, when is this race? 15th and 17th, you see, I can't, because I've got an event on the 16th and 17th. I was going to say,
but didn't you just pull a hamstring?
I have hurt myself. I can't work. I've got to take. I mean, the more we talk about this, the more I just want to climb on. I don't have the money to. That's ultimately the defining factor. I don't physically have the money to pay for a flight and accommodation to go there. But the more we talk about this, the more the wheels start going. I'm like looking around this room, going, I can sell that. I don't need that. We've got a lot of. Trey's got a lot of dinosaurs and football kits which I could sell.
And just presume Pecco wins both races and Martin gets 2/3, and now the points gap is down to 6. Man, then don't even climb on a plane. Jump in your car, go on your electric bike, plug the extension cord in, and off you go.
Yeah, listen, I don't know. I'm gonna have to take a good look in the mirror and see. There's a lot of things in this house we don't need. Question, guys, is there any info on an improvement on KTM for next year? I mean, all we want is that up there knows he's got the talent what it takes. That's from Shane. So let's quickly let's get into that. That's where we're getting in this. Yes, KTM Sarga makes me mad. Factory looking so strong, but gasket room past him on the podium. So much better showing from the Pure Mobility group on the Sunday race. Brad, Jack, and Pedro right in the mix there, a lot closer in those conditions, and it just highlights the fact you take a little bit of that corner speed out, and a little bit of those kind of speed factors, overall speed factors with the rain, and it put the riders and that machine a little bit closer. So I liked it because it clearly highlights again where KTM are missing: corner speed, acceleration drive out of the corners and an end. What impressed me was all three of them, how they managed the pace, they managed the race. You know, with all due respect, you were talking about earlier, watching those top left-hand corners. Yeah, I watched, you know, Pecco and Martin really waiting for them. But then you look at especially a Miller and a Acosta and you go, I'm waiting for Gravel to pull up that picture. You're just waiting for it. Brad, not so much, you know, because he's our Brad, you know. You just want him to go all the time. But I was waiting for that, and they pulled it together. What impressed me, I was impressed with Jack and Brad, and I'll get to that. Acosta really impressed me. Saturday, he did Acosta things again. It was his 5th DNF in a row, you know, crashing out of the sprint race on Saturday, showing great pace in the fight with Martin, and then but just doing the thing, just overriding the bike, which Brad's not prepared to do. That Sunday, Pedro's had very limited time on a MotoGP bike in those kind of conditions. And the way he started that race, all out of the shape, running wide, I thought, oh God, here we go. The kid just not learning. You know, I was like the dad on the side of the track going, what are you doing, you know? Then gathers it all together somehow and then puts in the most action-packed last 5 laps I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he throws it on the inside with that front brake jammed on the inside of Miller, and I think, kid, have you not learned anything? You are going to tuck the front end, knobhead, and off he goes. Then he passes Jack Miller, and he just puts in the sensational ride to put it on the podium. And I don't care who you are, what you think, you cannot but applaud that young man, because that was just brilliant.
Well, that showed the class of him. You know, when the conditions are tricky, basically his first time racing in those conditions, and look what he did. You know, as you say, first 2 or 3 laps, he was all over the show, and we were just waiting for the caption, yellow flags in sector, whatever. Pedro Acosta again. And he didn't do that. And he had the second fastest last 4 laps of the race. I just want to highlight who had the fastest last 4 laps of the race. Fabio Di Gianantonio.
Yeah, I was waiting.
So, I don't know, for those of you who haven't listened, log on to whoever provides your music, Spotify, and go and listen to the Oxley Bomb podcast, because they like me. They think he's a hero. And in all fairness to this kid, once again, damaged shoulder, not feeling up to it. His last race, I don't know where he qualified, 11th, I think. Finishes 4th. Runs for definitely the last 3 laps. He had the fastest lap times. Just shows that these youngsters have the maturity. They're getting there. They haven't got the experience of a Pecco Bagnaia or a Martin or a Marc Marquez, but they certainly have the balls and the skill. And those things, as we've said in previous shows, you can nurture that. You can't teach it to someone who hasn't got it. And they're going to get better and better and better. Pedro, less so because of the machinery. Di Gianantonio, Matt Oxley was saying what I think, you know, Mark and Pecco are going to dominate next year. It's almost a given. The dark horse, they believe, Di Gianantonio, because he'll be on a Ducati. But anyway, Pedro Acosta, absolutely superb. Brad, good. Jack Miller, fantastic. And you know me, I've had my say, not that I dislike him, but I think he's taking a ride from someone else. But he certainly showed when the conditions are not ideal, he certainly has the skill. Yeah. Just going back to Saturday sprint race, which disappointed me a little bit. First 8 bikes across the line, Ducatis. Just showed on that track, had Sunday been a dry race, you know, no one would have seen which way they went, which would have been a bit disappointing, because you don't want to see, I mean, we've seen Ducati domination, but that it doesn't get better than that when even Bezzecchi and Alex Marquez are ahead of Brad, Jack, Pedro, the Aprilias. Were the Aprilias actually there on the weekend?
I don't know. I mean, that's been a fall from grace. Aprilia had a nightmare, yeah, and that's purely down to riders that have switched off. Miguel Oliveira switched off long time ago. Ralph Fernandez doesn't bring anything to the party. Miguel didn't bring what they thought he would bring to the party. Aleix switched off a long time ago. His future sealed. And Maverick switched off a long time ago. His future was sealed. So they just
disappointing.
It's been bad. It's been bad.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But I think the youngsters coming through, the Acostas and the Gian Antonios, are worth their weight in gold. They really are. And I'm saying that because I've always said it. I like the Gian Antonio. I like Pedro Acosta. I like Brad to beat Pedro Acosta. But he's a youngster. He's learning first year. Yeah, I think he's really showing maturity and skill. And, you can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, Carlo Williams, DG for the win in 2025. I fully agree with you. I said I wanted to see more from DG. DG's proved that this year. At the start of the year, there was no ways me. I'm sure you did. I think you didn't even mention it. Well, maybe not even. A lot of people would never have thought come the end of the year, DG would be the number one rider in that VR46 team. It would be Bezzecchi.
100%.
You're never going to topple Bezzecchi.
No
Bezzecchi's
chance.
the next place, and he did it with all that pressure. In that environment, DG took it by the horns and he did it. I do think Sunday, the weather, with the injury that he's carrying, the weather and the slower pace, I say slower pace. I mean, they're still going faster than we could ever dream of in the wet, on wet tires. But that slower pace just worked in his favor, but didn't punish his shoulder as much. It's sad we're going to be missing him now for the next race meeting. Andrea Iannone has been confirmed. He will replace DG at Malaysia this weekend, and then it looks like it will be Pero for the final race. We're gonna have to wait and see there. But yeah, I have to take my head off to Digi. He's done everything I asked him to do to impress me, for me to take him more seriously. Done it brilliant. Digi had a phenomenal late race pace. Bastard keeps getting Brad on the last few laps. Peter Garmany, Edmund, great show, got a run. Thank you, Lisma, for joining us, and give your boys a big kiss. They're both doing great things in that paddock. Bjorn as our sidekick to Brad and Darren Binder now, and then I forgot the other sons, Ryan, working for Alpine Star. So if you look very carefully, you'll see a slightly different version of Bjorn standing in like a Jorge Martin pit or something in an Alpine Star shirt. He literally services all the Alpine Star riders' helmets and very actively involved with Alpine Star. So the Esmond boys doing a great job in the MotoGP paddock. Brilliant to see. Where's his comment? Is Martin going to be regretting signing for Aprilia? They have, Ollie Motor just talking about how Aprilia have switched off. Would Martin be signing for Aprilia now, knowing what he knows now, compared to what he, at Mugello when things were rosy?
Yeah, Rob, I've said it. I'm putting part of the blame on the management, because then the management have given up equally. Yes, we know there are changes happening there. So maybe him going there beginning of next season is going to wipe the slate clean and they're going to start anew. The problem is they've now set themselves back by whatever it is. And I know the engine freezes, but the data that they could be gathering, and as you say, Maverick, he's never been our favorite rider. Aleix was so good last year and then a part of this year, and then he got to a point where he just, you don't even, as I say, were they even there? Raul Fernandez, and we know that Lorenzo Savadori, if that's the best they've got, they're struggling. No disrespect to the guy, but he's never, I think he's in the same boat as a Stefan Bradl for Honda. They are now too far behind the pace that needs to be set as a test rider. A la Danny Pedrosa, Paul Espargaro. But what they've done is they've almost created this negativity that the whole team is feeling it now. And it's just not a good thing. I think Jorge will certainly take them out of the doldrums the minute he climbs on that bike. But will his attitude change when he climbs on the bike and he's like, oh, Blixen, what have I actually done? So I don't know, but it's very disappointing, because they were certainly coming on a lot stronger than KTM, where KTM seemed to have embraced the problems and they're trying to make it better. Honda and Yamaha, they seem to be showing a lot more intent. Their results might not be that much better, although I think Zarco had a good weekend. But still, Aprilia, they're almost, as I say, were they even there? And it's shining through the whole paddock. The commentators don't even talk about it. I think Zarco got more airtime than any Aprilia rider. So, it's very disappointing and a worry for them, because they're potentially going to have the world champion and definitely the runner-up coming into their team. Whatever happens, they need to get out of this cycle of whatever, I'm going to say negativity, whatever it is that they're going through.
Yeah, look, they've got a much better, stronger lineup for next year. That's, I think, the light at the end of the tunnel, with Martin, Bezzecchi, and Ayagura coming. We've spoken before about getting fresh mind, fresh kind of perspective in Ayagura has proved his worth in Moto3, Moto2 world champion now, and I think he's a great rider. I think his riding style will benefit Aprilia. So I think it's certainly looking better for them next year. This year it was always going to be a case of, how are we going to do this? How much energy does Aleix have left? Miguel, it's just been a bad signing, to be honest. He's becoming an Alex Rins almost, where he falls, he hurts himself. Alex Rins, I've touched upon it. As much of a fan as I am, what benefit is he to that Yamaha project at the moment? He's always, if he crashes, he's hurt, he's missing. He's saying now it's just not adapting to my riding style. He's not saying, I should be adapting my riding style. He's saying this bike's just not. So there's chinks there. There was a comment here I wanted to touch upon. Talking about Brad, I know it was upsetting seeing Pedro and Jack beat Brad. I took the positive that Brad was there. If Brad wasn't there, I would have been a lot worse. But Brad was there. Again, looked like he made a couple of mistakes. Didn't have the bike underneath him the last couple of laps and faded to that sixth position. Cool. But Francois Retief sums it up perfectly with his comment here. Brad seems to be riding well within himself, working on making the bike a bit better. Now, I say that's the perfect comment because we've touched upon it again and I saw it again. Brad is riding within the limits of himself and that bike now. Brad is not prepared to overstep this point. Jack and Pedro were, because they passed that thought pattern. Jack's always had a better feeling in those kind of conditions than Brad. Pedro was just, well, I'm going for it. That's all. It wasn't a case. It was a case of obviously of skill in that, but it was more a case of, like you said, that combination and mixture of balls and skill, and just thought process of, well, I'm going for it. I don't care if I crash this bike. Oh well, Brad's still going. Well, I've got a championship to think of here. Fifth, is actually a flippin' brilliant result at the end of the day. To be ahead of some of the Ducatis that he is ahead of all the Aprilias. He's the best non-Ducati. And that is a worthy title for Brad to take confidently and pat himself on the back at the end of what has been a disastrous year for him and for KTM, where everything is. That's a coup for Brad to put in his back pocket. So when I look at it like that, I go, you know what, Brad, especially with Sepang coming up, a track, he could be good at. He's been really good there in Moto2 before. Anything can happen. And then, as you said, Valencia, not too far away. So to go risk anything, crashing the bike, hurting himself or anything, between fourth and, I know the podium, but that wasn't also really on the cards come towards the end there for Brad. He had already kind of made those mistakes and lost touch. The difference between fourth and sixth to me doesn't mean anything, So yeah, I was disappointed, but again impressed with Brad and how he handled it, because again, tricky conditions, tricky everything. The KTM's not there. The KTM has beaten him into submission to want to try and risk things. If I'm saying that the right way, it's kind of put him in the mental space of, I'm just not willing to overstep the boundary of this bike. I don't trust it. Sixth place it is.
Yeah, Rob, I think your comment there, the bike has beaten him into submission. I think you spot on there, which almost could be a bit of a defeatist attitude, where Pedro certainly doesn't have that. Jack, as we know, those conditions, he's really good in those conditions. So realistically, if we see sunny weather over the next 2 weekends, Jack is going to be, maybe have good starts and consistently work himself out of the top 10. But for Brad, I hope it's not a bit of a defeatist attitude in that he's saying, well, to this point and no further. I don't know, because that can limit Brad's ability, where Pedro doesn't have that thinking. And it might be the reason why Pedro's, in the last couple of races, there's no doubt he's been faster than Brad. He hasn't finished ahead of Brad, and we know there's no remarks on the score sheet, and Brad's got more points than him. But in Brad's heart, he knows he needs to step up to the plate to match and better what Pedro's doing. So it's a very difficult one. Me personally, for the next 2 weekends, I'm not going to say I don't care where Brad finishes. I just want to see him finish, which he's good at, and he's going to be probably realistically 4th to 7th, weather dependent, because that Tuesday afterwards is the start of next season. And we want to know that him and Pedro are in good shape and they can get this project start doing the changes. This year they're not going to get better than a fifth in the championship. They're not going to win the Constructors' Championship. So let's make sure both of them are fit and healthy to start that test, to put them in a better footing, hopefully going forward for next year. That's why I think Brad now, he mustn't give up. That's not at all what I'm suggesting, but he must be circumspect and say, okay, Tuesday, the whatever of November, that day might be more important to KTM right now, unless he can win, or podium. Other than that, I think that must be their focus.
Yeah, Edwin Norris points out here, podium rookie Pedro 4, Brad 1. I don't know if he's talking about sprint and main race, because if he is, then obviously Brad's got 2 from Qatar. Yeah, but either way, that us as Brad fans can go on about it all we want, and he's better, and he's ahead of, he's the leading KTM in the championship, he's the best. That stat works in his favor. The other stat, that stat doesn't work in his favor, and that is why KTM have had what seems to be the shift to more of what Pedro's doing in terms of development with the bike and the direction. And you can't argue with that, because, as you said, who has been the faster rider over the past couple of races? Probably over the whole season. Pedro Acosta's been the fastest rider. Brad's been the more consistent, reliable rider. So you've got to try and now infuse that together. And exactly what you've just said. If the KTM and the new management, Aki Ayo, can bring that together, along with the beautiful ingredient that is Andrea Bastianini coming into that project, the Maverick Vinales, take what you want out of it. We don't know. Well, we do know, but we don't know. Things are looking up for KTM. I think Mariska said earlier, she's got a good feeling about KTM going for the Constructors' title next year, and then really being a force to be reckoned with. Talking about it and pulling it apart like that, yes, but at the same time, there's now this cloud of finances hanging over KTM's shoulder, which I think probably the biggest talking point, rather than the results and Brad who's finishing and Pedro, is how's this going to affect the project. Brad came out on the weekend, he was asked the question, he said, no, not at all. Our focus is this, the project's staying like this. It can't be. That's a PR answer. It cannot be. Thousands of people cannot lose their jobs, and 75 gazillion still be poured into Pit Byra and his KTM project, his MotoGP project account. They're going to obviously downgrade in motocross, enduro, because KTM have got this massive footprint. And remember, it's not just KTM, it's Gas, it's Husqvarna, it's CF Moto, it's all these things. They've got to somehow condense this without losing this. They've made the big decision to sign a Bastianini and a Vinales, which is costing them big money, and a Pedro Acosta and a Brad. That's 4 full factory KTM bikes on the grid, plus the 4 bikes in the pits ready to go, bike number 2s, plus all the spares in that, plus the development team. It's a big undertaking, but somewhere there's got to be cost cutting. They've lost a couple of key players, big technicians that have left and now gone to Aprilia and done this and left, and so there's got to be something somewhere that's got to give. Let's just hope that doesn't impact it. And as I said, this new management can pull it together and take all this ingredient and just make it a better dish. Because if they do, there's no reason KTM can't be more of a force to be reckoned with next year.
Yeah, 100%, Rob. And I think the changes they've made are positive, but that financial cloud, it might not affect a Brad, a Bastianini, a Pedro Acosta, but behind the scenes, so now when they were making 10 different parts to try over a 1-month period, now they may be only going to have 4 parts to try, so somewhere along the line, there is going to be a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
The good thing is, if they do start turning the results around, we know the old adage that says, what wins on Sunday sells on Monday. Yeah. So if that starts to happen, and I know KTM, you're not going to rush out and buy RC8 or whatever the equivalent is, because first of all, it's a limited edition, but it will boost KTM as a brand. So certainly there's pros and cons to both, but the financial woes, and make no mistake, the financial woes possibly less so Honda and Yamaha, but it's going to bite everybody. Aprilia, we know they sell the least amount. So yeah, definitely it's going to be a problem for everybody. But yeah, hopefully this whole KTM story turns around, and I think Maverick in the test is going to be the fastest there, because that's Maverick.
Yeah.
But then the minute something goes wrong, that's when he's out of there. So I wouldn't be shocked to find him certainly competitive. But we need him to be competitive from day one, which is the middle of November, till day finish, which is the end of November next year. And it doesn't seem like he can do that.
I just think, you put those 4 riding styles, and we've spoken about it before. KTM have got to be looking forward to getting 4 lots of quality FOS data. At the moment, Miller's been off it. Augusto Fernandez has just not been there. They've really been relying on Brad and Pedro. Now you've got 4, and you've got Enea Bastianini's late race pace and tire management that you can now get information for. He's always going to set his bike up that way to manage the tires and make it last the distance. Then you've got the Pedro flat out, go for it. I need a bike that can do this, brake hard, do this. And in some way, you've got the Vinales who's like that as well. I want a bike that's just fast and perfect every lap. And if it's not, I'm not. But you've got the information. Then you've got the reliable Brad that's a bit of all of it and does well at putting it all together. This is what gets me and a lot of people excited about the KTM project. But again, we've said it boils down to how it's managed. And looking at it, the appointment of Akiayo adds to the excitement of that because of his success and his portfolio and his CV, he's been the perfect guy to manage all of that. He's managed Brad, he's managed Pedro, he knows how to manage these situations. Is he the guy that finally is the click for Maverick Vinales? Is this written in the stars? Was this move of Vinales to KTM meant to be because Aki is going to be this guy that finally sorts Vinales out to make him a true contender? This is all the exciting stuff about KTM, and I just hope that, I just hope this cloud of financial doesn't come into play and kind of just bring that whole recipe down.
Yeah, Rob, and they've got shareholders and directors, and the first thing they look at is the bottom line and the results. So unfortunately, they need to now get the results to justify the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult thing, because at the moment, if you're not on a Ducati, you're not. So Pedro's had 4 podiums. Brad, we know definitely 2, but that was the first race of the year. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the project's heading in the right direction, and the problem is Ducati seem to know how to move the goalpost before anyone else. And when everyone thinks they're moving it to the left, suddenly Ducati move it to the right. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Very interesting.
This is why I like Oli Moto. KTM should have signed Toprak instead of Vinales. Oh, I love that. I know. See, we were talking, Paul, the last show, just to end off, about Toprak and One World Superbikes, and the whole MotoGP conversation died. And I think the next day I saw the headline of Toprak wants MotoGP in 2026, but he doesn't want to Marc Marquez kind of deal. Listen, I love the fact that Toprak's saying that, because he's saying, listen, he's putting himself in the shop window, saying, here I am. Take me, but I'm not coming at a stupid contract where you're not paying me anything and you're lucky to be in MotoGP. I'm worth my weight in gold. I will make your bike better, your project better. Sign me now. And if that doesn't make Yamaha or Honda jump, I don't know what will. I still think, like Oli Moto, I would like to see him on a KTM, not at the cost of a Brad Binder, of course, at a cost of a Vinales or someone. The Pedro Acosta, Alberto Puig came out very, very thoroughly and said, we want Pedro Acosta. He almost pretty much said it straight. We want Pedro Acosta. We will pay whatever we will. I could see that move happening. I could honestly see that move. I think Pedro Acosta is that kind of mentality. When he gets challenged like that, he'll go, sweet, I'm up for that challenge. I'll come sort that Honda out. I'll make it win again. Mark who? I'll win you 9 World Champion. You know what I mean? Pedro looks like that kind of guy that, I'll call him your mate and whatever, but names and that don't mean nothing to me. Not even about the paycheck. It's about Pedro. It's about the headline that Pedro's going to make. So that could happen, and then Toprak could fill in there. So there's all these kind of things that are going to come into play. Toprak will be 29 in 2026. Too late for him to adapt. Wayne, I don't agree. I think 29. I think Toprak's in his prime. I think Toprak, as I've said, has got such a feel for a motorcycle. I think he's I think he's primed for MotoGP. I think 2026, even bring him in and he'll get the job done. Is what I think.
Yeah, the problem is his age definitely will be against him. I'm not saying it's a limiting factor.
No, sure, no.
His problem is, what ride is he going to get? So
Yeah.
let's just say he comes to a Yamaha or a Honda, where the bike, as good as he is, the bike is not up to scratch with currently the Ducati. That's my concern. Maybe a KTM better package, we know that. And even the Aprilia, better package than a Yamaha or a Honda.
Mm.
Depends where he would fit in. Very difficult one to answer. I'd love to see him in MotoGP. Unfortunately, if we go to the statistics, and I think it's Ollie Moto who loves telling us all the stats, superbike riders coming to MotoGP hasn't worked.
Mm.
Just hasn't worked for whatever reason. I do think Toprak is special. He's got that X factor, and he can bring that along. And I agree with you. He's got that feel, that's something that the Marc Marquez's, Valentino Rossi, Pecco Bagnaia, they've got it that possibly a Danny Pedrosa just lacked that, or at that time. He's definitely got that in the World Superbike paddock, no doubt. He's the pinnacle. Whether it would translate to MotoGP, he loves that heavy front end braking.
Uh-huh.
So is that going to suit him on a KTM? I don't know. So anyway, but hopefully that exercise, we know it's not going to happen for next year, but 2026, I'm sure if there's any possibility, Kenan Safoglu is pulling rabbits out of every hat that he can find, because I think he's equally as determined as Toprak to get into MotoGP with Toprak. So I think I do see it happening, but obviously end of next season.
Now, Wayne Taylor says, I thought Ben Spies had that X factor, but it was nowhere in GP. I think I don't know. I think he did prove himself in many ways. I think his biggest problem was there was the Rossi and Lorenzo, that era where, he just had to fit in. A lot of riders had to just fit in to that alien era. He put in some great performances. I think injury was always his kind of problem. We saw with Alvaro Bautista last year, and I know Andrea Iannoni's going to be judged. That whole World Superbike MotoGP is going to be brought up again this weekend. Iannoni's not going to do anything this weekend. As I said, I like kind of the storyline of, he was kicked out of MotoGP for the doping or whatever. He's served his time now. Now he's back. Great. I like that story. He's not going to be competitive at all. You can't expect the guy to be. I don't think it's a true reflection on it. I do think Toprak, there will be adjustment. I do think a World Superbike, the more production-based, has that flexibility that suits him a bit. A MotoGP is direct and hard, and listen, don't play games with me because I'll just throw you off this thing. The Michelin tires are like that, very one-directional. Toprak needs a bit more. So I'm not saying he'll walk in and destroy everyone. I think he'll be competitive, and I think he'll make whatever package he's on better. Is why I'm excited about the whole Toprak exercise. So yeah, it's one, again, this is all just, we can talk about it for days until it happens. We won't know the answers. So Ollie Moto Paul does say, I am the stat man. I am the stat man.
There we go. Yeah.
But anyway, that's it. Paul, we could really just talk for hours about this. It's so intriguing. And this is, forget the 8 Ducatis, forget Ducati Cup, forget all that. We are talking about a championship that is going down to the wire. We are talking about a competitive championship with riders pushing man and machine to the absolute limit. We are talking about skill and mental strength being shown in all kinds of conditions. I remember watching old 500cc races in the rain where the guys looked like they were standing still, and some riders would get lapped 5 times. It was that.
Yeah.
I thought that's why I made the comment of take a bow to all the MotoGP riders. They all put on a show. And one last thing is, I did enjoy the fact we've all harped on about MotoGP TV directors show more of the racing behind, and Marini came out and said they had glimpses of it. I don't know if you saw it. They showed the Marini battle.
Yeah.
They showed the Brad and Acosta a little bit more. They went back a little bit and showed a couple of glimpses. So I know we don't say it often enough, but hats off to Dorna for doing it. The TV directors.
Yeah, a little bit better. Yeah, for most certainly. Yeah. So
Paul, I think that was a brilliant show again, and we're going to be talking next week Tuesday with even more excitement. It's just somehow I have to make our couches survive that Sunday, because mine's already taking strain, I can tell you.
Yeah. Listen, Rob, I think our conversation next week is going to be exactly the same, but so different, because We've got 2 races. So much can happen, and at the same time, so little can change. But so much can change. It's going to be your temperament this weekend is actually more important than Valencia, because this weekend sets up Valencia. So you need to be, as we've said, a plus game, no margin for error, 100% from Friday morning till Sunday afternoon, and good luck to the 2 of them. That's all I can say. And I'm not saying that I want this one or that one to win. I'm just saying, boys, from a spectator with a heart rate going up already, thinking about it, I'm glad I'm not in their shoes, but I look so forward to watching each and every session. And what I miss, I record and then watch later. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to be enthralling.
Wayne Taylor wants us to end with who's going to be on the podium this weekend. I'll go first this time because I put pressure on you last time, Paul. I'm going to say Pecco, Martin, Bastianini.
For the Sunday race.
Yeah,
listen, Mark's already come out and said Sepang, not one of his favorite tracks. He doesn't go very well there. So I'm going to say Martin, Bastianini, Pecco.
I think you can't go wrong with that, because I would tick that off if I was a school teacher. You'd get an A+ for that as well. So
thank you.
There really is no wrong answer when you involve Martin, Pecco, and Mark. To be honest, you really can't get it wrong. Let's hope. There's a wild card from Brad in the front there. A Pedro, maybe. A Bezzecchi and Aprilia even. Let's hope to ruffle feathers and make it a little bit more exciting. But either way, it's going to be exciting, because like you said, even though there weren't many passes, the last couple of races not been passes and whatever, that tension, that sitting there looking in that top left corner waiting to see gravel keeps us on the edge of our seat. So,
because they're both prone to making mistakes. Had it been a Lorenzo or a Eddie Lawson or Wayne Rainey, even from days gone by, you knew there was going to be no mistake. But both these guys are prone to making mistakes, and not when they're under pressure, when they've got those buffers of 1.5, 2 seconds, and then that's lack of concentration for a split second, because they're on the edge, corner after corner after corner. And I don't mean the edge of the tire, I mean the edge of the tire.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's end it there, Paul. Thank you so much again to everyone who tuned in, all the great comments. It's just brilliant. Again, I just absolutely love it. We started the show because it just wanted a bunch of fans to be talking, and every time it just gets me excited, and cannot wait for the weekend. Have a great week further. Let's hope for a good racing weekend, no doubt about it. And then let's catch up next week, Tuesday again.
Yeah, to everyone who tuned in and watched, thanks again, guys. And we look so forward to catching up next Tuesday with all the drama, the stories, the insights, and our little bit of input.
Cheers, guys. Have a great one.
Cheers, Rob.
Cheers, Paul.
Good night.